So Parliament's ad hoc committee says the postponement of its hearings into allegations made by Mkhwanazi was inevitable. The committee will only resume after Mkhwanazi concludes his testimony at the Madlanga Commission. Chairperson Soviet Lekganyane says the committee unanimously agreed that Mkhwanazi should be the first witness. So let's get some reaction to that. We are joined by EFF spokesperson Sinawo Thambo now for more. Sinawo, good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, this is going to be quite the discussion, and just the tight timeframes, of course, come to mind here when you consider that this is an ad hoc committee that essentially has up until the 31st of October to conclude its work. Now, suspensions of its work until General Mkhwanazi is done giving evidence to the Commission. What is the EFF's position on this?
I think it's an undermining of the legislature. So there are two separate arms of the state which are conducting investigations into this matter, not counting the Chapter 9 institution, which is the public protector, which I think also reportedly got a report. But the legislature is tasked to investigate the claims made into the capture of law enforcement agencies, which were brought to the fore by Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, and the executive, through the president, established a commission of inquiry as well. Now, the time frames become tight, and I listened to what the chair of that board ad hoc committee said, that we can't expect Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi to be at two places in once. No one would have expected this. The work of the ad hoc committee began on the 1st of September, and the Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi at that time could have availed himself and was requested to avail himself between the 10th as well up until now, and was unable to do so due to a commitment to the Commission of Inquiry. A Commission of Inquiry which for a large part of this month we were not sure when it was going to sit because it was postponed indefinitely. So the situation of him having to split himself into two does not arise. It's just simply a juniorizing of the ad hoc committee which is established by Parliament, making it a secondary platform where there's even claims that it will be given affidavits which are already submitted to the Commission of Inquiry, rendering the ad hoc committee as subordinate to whatever the executive has established. And that is what we are opposing as the EFF. And the EFF has therefore called for General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi to be subpoenaed. This unfortunately did not gain traction in the ad hoc committee. And we've been made to understand that the ad hoc committee then will wait for him to conclude his contributions there, because it is essential that he begins his testimony. Rather that the ad hoc committee begins testimony with him and does not come back to him in retrospect. Otherwise, it defeats the purpose.
Yeah, can we just go back to the issue of timeframes now? Because I mentioned the 31st of October as a deadline, but we know that there's a list of people that are going to be called after General Mkhwanazi to give evidence, and that list, of course, is something that we await to see. My understanding at this point, and you can clarify for me, is that we are expecting to see 7 people give evidence to the ad hoc committee. What would that look like if the Lieutenant General is available after the 24th of September? Is that enough time?
Look, we're going to have to try and make it as much time as possible, but also we have to utilize the powers vested in the ad hoc committee as contemplated in the terms of reference, which prescribe the ability to subpoena. Now, the word subpoena has become a swear word for no clear and verifiable reason in South African society, because it is a power that is vested within the terms of reference. And we saw political parties in that committee this afternoon dilly-dallying around the possibility of subpoenaing Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi as if that is something that is offensive. We are obligated to do that in accordance with the terms of reference which are adopted. And that power is created for this exact purpose, to ensure that we conduct all of these investigations and receive all of these testimonies in due course. It's not only 7 people, and it's not only individuals that are going to be summoned by the ad hoc committee. It's clusters and departments in government, from the South African Police Services to the judiciary, the NPA. So it's various sectors and clusters that govern this country as it relates to law enforcement. So you will find that in one cluster there could be 7 people, in another there could be 10. So it limits the ability of the ad hoc committee to do its work effectively, and it's an undermining of the democratic will of South Africans who have vested their interests and their democratic will and support to public representatives they've elected to protect their interests. So it's quite unfortunate.
What happens if by the 31st of October the ad hoc committee simply has not gotten to all of those entities and individuals that have been called to give evidence to the committee?
Look, it's established in accordance with the National Assembly. So naturally, the chairperson of the ad hoc committee would have to write to the speaker to request an extension if that is necessary. That is something we want to avoid. There's no cost related to the establishment of our committee. There's no renting of buildings. There's no infrastructure in the same way that delayed the Commission of Inquiry, which of course we know will make non-binding recommendations as opposed to Parliament, which can make binding resolutions and legislation to change and reverse the capture of law enforcement institutions. So we would have to use the appropriate parliamentary channels and ensure that the National Assembly is also in concurrence with an extension should it be necessary. But our deployees to that ad hoc committee will try and ensure that we utilize the powers vested in us as an ad hoc committee to ensure that we conclude the work in due course.
You know, we're going to be speaking to the MK party in a few moments, hopefully. But one of the things that they've raised is, for instance, in those list of other people that will be called towards the committee to give evidence, their concern about whether there is clarity on the former police minister, Bheki Cele, and if he's been invited to testify. I mean, some clarity on that in the EFF's position.
The EFF is in complete support of the calling of Bheki Cele to the ad hoc committee. He's someone who was part and parcel of establishing the political task team, but also in recent weeks, we've seen that he's been linked with one Vusiket Madlanga in terms of calling him repetitively. He's been linked with staying in his penthouse. So he's someone that could shed light on a lot of issues that relate to the political killings task team. So it's something that we would support, that he must be able to appear there as he forms part of the policing cluster. So current ministers, former ministers, acting ministers, an anomaly that exists now while there's a minister on a leave of absence. The EFF has also said that the head of the NDPPA, Shamila Batoyi, should appear before the ad hoc committee because she was one of the first people to raise the alarm about the compromising and infiltration of the National Prosecuting Authority. So it shows you that the rot goes quite deep across law enforcement agencies. So she's someone that must come in as well. She, of course, ended up retracting that after engagements with the minister and with the president, that she used excessive language, but it showed you that she was speaking the truth. And I think it was actually here on Newzroom Afrika where she said that. So there's quite a lot of individuals that need to come to the fore, and the EFF will ensure that that happens.
Yeah, just, of course, you say your motion to have Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi subpoenaed not really passing with your fellow members of parliament, but I want to get the picture of how you would have imagined this logistically playing out when you do have the general sitting before the commission, and what, you know, logistically that would have looked like. I bring it up because we had a conversation just earlier on this week with Kusela Diko of the ANC, and one of the things that she talked about is that this isn't an unwillingness from the Lieutenant General or anyone else for that matter, but simply a scheduling matter that we all just have to accept, right? What do you make of that posturing?
It's a scheduling matter that arises due to deliberate delays from members of the ad hoc committee themselves. So the ad hoc committee has begun its work a couple of weeks ago. So it's the scheduling delays or the scheduling clashes that are arising now are a result of deliberate delays by members of the committee who've been avoiding subpoenaing the Lieutenant General as something that the EFF has long proposed. It was last week already, where we said that the more you avoid implementing the terms of reference as it relates to subpoenas, the closer it becomes to clashing with the Commission of Inquiry. And at that time, the Commission of Inquiry was suspended indefinitely. They then pronounced a date sometime late last week, which resulted in this becoming more and more pressing. We've then proposed that he should have appeared on the 15th of September, which would have been next week, Monday, which would have been 2 days before his appearance, which was due in the Commission of Inquiry on the 17th. That was shut down as well. So you can see the juniorization of the ad hoc committee of parliament, which is a separate arm of the state, as opposed to the Commission of Inquiry, which is established by the executive. And it's a disrespect we should not tolerate. And people can have their views about parliament, about parliamentarians, but it is an institution of the state that is obliged to conduct oversight, it is obliged to make laws. So whatever anyone has, their personal feelings they may have towards parliament must be subjected to the democratic will of the people, which established that parliament, which is constituted by members who are elected by the people. And this undermining is something that can set a precedent that is very dangerous. And that is what the EFF was raising. Yeah,
much of the efficiency, though, of the work of the ad hoc committee will also be up to just how members of this ad hoc committee move swiftly through issues. One of the concerns that were raised by the Freedom Front Plus's voter versus, for instance, is what he's called a locking of horns between the members of the ad hoc committee, and then of course also the ad hoc committee in Madlanga. But the efficiency of your own ad hoc committee to move swiftly, what needs to be talked about within yourselves?
I think there needs to be toning down on defensiveness. So one would naturally understand that political parties which are currently governing, and since Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi spoke about political interference and political meddling and capture of politicians as well, one can naturally believe that there's reluctance from members of certain political parties which have been in government and are in government to process matters swiftly. And that is a natural response when you are possibly implicated in criminality or your members are implicated in criminality. We know that arising from the allegations by Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi is the now leave of absence, something that's not constitutionally provisioned for, of Senzomkhulu. So you could understand why they would be reluctant to swiftly deal with this matter, why they would be reluctant to allow the Lieutenant General to be the first to appear in this committee, why they would want us to interrogate with deputy ministers who have no verifiable role or consequence before we interact with the actual people who are in charge of these institutions. They want to numb down the teeth of the process of the ad hoc committee. And if members could put down their political party badges and actually serve with their conscience and with their loyalty to the Constitution in that ad hoc committee, there would not have been any delays and we would not foresee any delays going forward. But of course, there's vested interest to stifling this process and ensuring that a commission of inquiry, which can only make non-binding recommendations and end up on the desk of a president who has chosen to place a political ally on a leave of absence which does not exist in the Constitution, rather than removing him completely, is something that they would prefer.
Yeah. Right, well, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us. And of course, we'll be watching closely the work of the ad hoc committee. Mr. Sinawo Thambo, the EFF national spokesperson.